Guild Wars 3. The conspiracy fever dream that is the current bug floating around in the community. And I gotta say, I really wasn't entertaining the idea of a Guild Wars 3 for some time. You know, I was playing Guild Wars 2, I was enjoying, I was living, I was thriving. I didn't want to leave behind the account that I spent 10 years building up. But something's clicked. Something in my brain has turned on and turned me on to the idea of a Guild Wars 3. Painting more modern images of a Guild Wars universe in an Unreal Engine 5, that might have started a fire, and I don't have a fire extinguisher. Currently, the only MMO that I'm aware of that is utilizing Unreal Engine 5 is Ashes of Creation, so there doesn't seem to be a saturated market of modern MMOs being developed. These community theories all came about with ArenaNet's job posting, where they're looking for people to work on an unannounced project that utilizes Unreal Engine 5, and some of the wording in that description kind of leans towards an MMO of sorts, or some type of game that has multiplayer interactions, or a sense of community. Now, to make it clear, I have no clue what to think of this, but with the amount of time it takes to make an MMO, or any game in general, it would be smart to start as early as possible, like with a game that is currently in its 4th expansion being developed. We might also get a 5th one, and then perhaps by that time, you know, maybe the stars align. So, with that said, let's entertain this conspiracy theory just a little bit, and let me share with you 5 things I would like to see in a Guild Wars 3. First and foremost, all the races and professions that we currently have in Guild Wars 2, I think fit perfectly. I think having that 9-class system of the Revenant, Warrior, Guardian, Ranger, Thief, Engineer, and Necromancer, Elementalist, and Mesmer, it's such a solid and well-rounded group of classes, especially given our current understanding of the specialization system and how we customize classes. I think the Guild Wars universe has a great depth and breadth of playstyles and fantasies to go after. Now, there are also classes that aren't in Guild Wars 2, which were in Guild Wars 1, such as the Ritualist, Paragons, Dervishes, for counting Utopia, Summoners, and Chronomancer as its own class, but there's plenty to dive into. So I would love to see, you know, just a Guild Wars 3 in a modern engine utilizing the same classes that we love with the same combat styles. Now, with the races, I think the 5 races that we have are a great set. They're an amazing platform to further diversify characters and create stories, but, you know, Tengu are so interesting to me, and also dwarves. Or Largos. There's multiple other races that would be really interesting to see in the Guild Wars universe, in a Guild Wars video game. Now, it's been so long that we haven't received a playable race ever in Guild Wars 2, to the point where I'm kind of thinking, what if they never do add a new playable race, and instead, upon another game coming into the cycle, we have perhaps another playable race that we could entertain, and maybe the systems would be a little bit more forgiving for them to develop new races and adjust armor, perhaps. I don't know all of the limitations that go into why they haven't added a new race, but there probably are limitations. Number 2, building upon everything we know and love about the combat system. I think having a different and more modern engine could provide a bit more of a dynamic gameplay experience with the visual aspect of it, the weight behind attacks, and also sound. Sound is actually pretty important when it comes to games, and I've heard that Unreal Engine 5 and more modern systems allow for more dynamic sound, dynamic lighting, and just overall allowing for a more updated gameplay experience. Now, this being said, the Guild Wars 2 engine and all of the add-ons that were put in place to get the combat that we have today, that combat system is really great. It's lasted the test of time. It's probably one of the more pleasing combat systems in an MMO, and this game released in 2012, so I am by no means slacking. and picking on the current Guild Wars 2 combat system. But, of course, with time, code and just spaghetti code, starting fresh doesn't sound too bad. So yeah, just building upon it, more telegraphs, different ways of actually applying effects, sound design, visuals, culling, all of that. The combat is fantastic. Knowing ArenaNet, I would be super excited to see what they could do with an Unreal Engine 5. Number 3, a more structured PvE gameplay experience from the jump. If we ever did get a Guild Wars 3, I would say the biggest issue that they could learn from Guild Wars 2's development was not having as solid of a PvE experience as they could have. In the early days of Guild Wars 2, it was really being marketed and slanted as more of a PvP game. Now, over the years, that's also started to dwindle, where the focus is more so shifted towards a PvE experience. It took a long time for us to get to this point where we are getting consistent endgame content in the form of strike missions, and for a time we were getting raids as well. If we ever did receive a Guild Wars 3, I would love to see more attention to dungeons, and something that's more akin to what MMO players are used to, where you get access to dungeons at a pretty early level, and that there are queue systems for you to queue into a dungeon, so you don't have to rely on people being brave enough to post up a notification on the bulletin board that is the LFG that we have. So I think even in Guild Wars 2, the PvE systems could be improved, and I think it'd be a worthwhile endeavor to improve them where they see fit. But if a new game was to be made, I would really like these features to be supported from the jump. Number 4, a more open world game. Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 are both heavily instanced games. Now, Guild Wars 2 was more revolutionary in terms of allowing multiple players to exist in the same instance. Guild Wars 1 was a very separate game. It was much more strategic. So, however, each map is still instanced, and over the years, getting access to more traversal mechanics such as mounts, they've really made those core zones really small in terms of the feel of them. The size hasn't changed, but increasing player mobility and player speed really does feel like the maps have shrunk in a way. So if they ever did make a Guild Wars 3, I think having a system where larger maps existed, where instead of like 5 instanced maps made up the human cities, it would instead just be one larger map. I think having a little bit more of a genuine open world experience akin to systems we got with World of Warcraft and Rift really are special in MMORPGs. And number 5, coming in at hot number 5, I would love to see a console port and support for a Guild Wars game. I think it's really disappointing that Guild Wars 2 doesn't really utilize controller support, nor is it really accessible on any consoles, because the gameplay fits super well. And because they've really perfected, in my opinion, they've perfected the gameplay aspect, I can't see them getting rid of that if they ever did continue on the series. Surmising that they did continue with their combat system, I think it just fits super well with a console, perhaps on the Xbox or PlayStation, or of course coming to Steam. I think having a Steam release earlier would be smart as well, and controller support is something that even PC players would like to see. I know my friend Glenn Angel uses the controller, and I think it's just an added layer of accessibility and flexibility, and it works pretty well. Like, the combat is very dynamic and it feels like an actual RPG combat system. And yes, those are my quick 5 bullet pointed list of ideas if the Guild Wars franchise was ever continued on to a more modern MMORPG system. Now, once again, there is no guarantee that we're getting a Guild Wars 3. Or it could just be like a different IP, a different MMO, where they are expanding their boundaries and getting more intellectual property to diversify their portfolio as a studio. And I think that's also cool. I think ArenaNet as a studio has made such great games that no matter what is coming down the pipeline, I am more than willing to try it out and give it a fair shot. But being a Guild Wars fan and a fan of this franchise, I am kind of excited at the idea of Guild Wars 3. But even more excited at the upcoming 4th expansion for Guild Wars 2. I am super excited for this game's future and also the franchise's future. So I would love to hear what you all have to think down below. Are you resistant to the idea of a Guild Wars 3? Are you embracing the idea of a Guild Wars 3? Are you set in stone that you absolutely want a Guild Wars 3? Or were you like me, where you were maybe like, absolutely not, and then something decided to click in your brain and you're like, you know what? It's a new dawn, it's a new day. 2022, Unreal Engine 5, not many people in the market for Unreal Engine 5 MMOs. You might as well get your foot in while you can. I would love to hear everyone's opinions down below. If you'd like to support the channel, head on over to the Patreon and get early access to all of these videos. If you'd like to catch me on Twitch, I'm there every day of the week, streaming usually Guild Wars 2. And if you'd like to purchase the game or try it for free, I have links down below, courtesy of ArenaNet. Thank you all so much, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone! Mwah!